Welcome everyone to the Preschool Mindfulness Summit. I'm really excited today to introduce you to Alan Brown. He is the lead teacher and curriculum designer for Mindful School's flagship training program, the Mindful Teacher Certification Program. So we're very excited to have him here, and he works through his own consulting firm, which is called Learning to Thrive. He's a frequent speaker and presenter at schools about mindfulness, resilience, and positive education. And he's been a teacher and a school administrator for over 15 years. He also runs mindfulness programs for Grace Church School in New York City, and does a whole range of other things like supporting the Tourette syndrome community with mindfulness programs. So thank you so much, Alan, for joining us and for sharing with us today.
Thank you.
Great. And Alan's session today is called Teaching Attention in the Age of Distraction, which I think is something we're all wondering about and interested in learning more. So we keep reading in the newspaper and all on the internet about this crisis of attention and how children are much more distracted nowadays, and how screen time is taking over. So could you maybe talk a little bit about that? Is it as bad as we think it is? And how does attention actually work in this case?
Sure. So, I know for myself, in the 15 or so years that I've been teaching, it is true that I have noticed a shift in students with cell phones, Blackberries, then smartphones, and, sort of the progression of technology has come along, and a lot of my work is with high school students. So of course they carry the devices with them. That desire for screen time and the way that attention for students is pulled. There is, on one hand, sort of a palpable shift. But I think the larger shift is in how we talk about attention. You mentioned kind of this crisis of attention that is often what's invoked. I think parents, teachers, we get really, really freaked out, frankly, by, oh my God, they're not paying attention. And if we dial back the clock, we look, 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years ago, students throughout time have found ways to not pay attention to their teachers, their parents. For me, it was passing notes. That's what we used to do. It's not unusual. It's not entirely unusual that children might not necessarily be paying attention. But our minds go very quickly to kind of catastrophizing about, we're raising a generation that won't be able to pay attention to anything. We're raising, these kids will never be able to get a job, or how do they expect to this or that? It's so disrespectful. It's all these things. And yet, I think it's sort of a very natural play of events. You can even look back. I really find it fascinating to read in light of when the printing press first came about. If you read the reactions to the printing press, there was all sorts of information overwhelm that really mirrors what people say today about the internet or Twitter or, any of it. Like, oh, there are all these books now and they're coming out so fast, I can't keep up with them all. So we have this natural, when there's so much information, when we can't necessarily feel like we can take it all in, that does feel uncomfortable. It feels unsettling. But again, it's sort of a natural part of the mechanism, I would say, of attention, because attention was designed, sort of in the evolutionary sense. And we really haven't evolved all that appreciably much in 40,000 years. Right. The attention hasn't. So the attention that we have is designed for kind of a hunter-gatherer life. It's designed to move us towards rewards and away from threat. On a very, very basic level. We move towards food or reproduction or the things that will sustain us and our species. And we move away from, say, the animals that might like to have us for lunch. And so we have these very, a very distractible, what we now think of as distractible,
Right.
could actually also just be called vigilant. Like the attention is vigilant to our surroundings. And when there's new and novel information, the brain is always going to want to evaluate it as is this a threat? Is this a reward? That's just part of how the mechanism works.
Right.
And so it doesn't know the difference between the cell phone and, the tiger that might eat us. So it's really actually hard for the attention, the way it's built, to exist in the world that has so much novelty and so much stimulus kind of coming at us. That's not a problem per se, but it's just sort of cooked into how the system is.
Yeah. Wow. So, well, that's good to hear that maybe it's not the crisis that we all think it is. Alan, can you talk a little bit more about, the two kinds of attention? I know you just touched on it, the top down and the bottom up, and then maybe how mindfulness might help us to pay more attention.
Sure. Right. So there's this idea that when stimulus drives the attention, that is, there's a sound, there's a noise. I just heard, I don't know if my microphone picked it up, but I heard a truck out on the street in front of my window here. So my attention went out to the outside. That was called by an outside stimulus. So that's this sort of bottom-up attention. And it's the one that the devices tend to interact with, or like all of these times that whether it's a noise, whether it's someone speaking to us, it could be any kind of sensory event, light, or so that, oh, what is that? And that's generally also followed by and is it safe? Am I safe? Am I okay? So there's this kind of constant radar of boom, 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 whatever outside stimulus is. And that drives this bottom-up attention where attention is called to a target, by that stimulus. Then there's the conscious choice that we're able to make. And not all animals have this conscious choice. If you take like a reptile, some people will actually call or refer to that bottom-up attention as a function of the reptilian brain, which we have and has evolved over time. But the evolution has allowed us to also have a top-down attention, to have this executive functioning, executive control by which we can say, I would like to place my attention here. Or I would like to not place my attention. So now I'm hearing the truck outside and I know it's a truck and I'm aware and I would like to choose to keep my attention on this conversation. So that's an executive choice that I'm making. That's top-down attention. And when we sort of train the attention with mindfulness, I mean, this is one of the sort of most fundamental elements of mindfulness, is teaching the attention or teaching ourselves to stay with one object of attention over time. We know it will wander, by the way, and this is why I say, like, any teacher who practices mindfulness, or any parent who practices mindfulness, finds it a little easier to not get annoyed at students when their attention wanders, because we all know that, wow, I've been here for not longer than 30 seconds trying to pay attention to my breath or my feet on the floor or whatever it's happening. And off I go, racing into thoughts or hearing whatever I'm hearing, right? Like the mind will go pretty much everywhere because that's how it's, right? That's how it goes. But when we practice mindfulness, again, it's over time. We're kind of, one of the ways I like to talk about it with kids is I say we're kind of flexing the attention muscle, and the attention goes away and then we pull it back, and it goes away and we pull it back, and we build that muscle, obviously not a muscle, but we build that muscle over time in such a way that it does in fact strengthen, because any capacity of the brain, whichever things that we repeat, the kinds of thoughts and the kinds of thinking and the kind of brain function we do, builds that capacity in the brain. That's sort of basic neuroplasticity 101. We can learn to grow the capacity of attention.
Yeah.
And that's the top-down attention.
Right. So when you talk about attention as a safety game, can you explain a little bit more about what that means? And I think you have an acronym that you use to help us with that.
Sure. Right. So because one of the things that drives bottom-up attention, that drives that stimulus-driven attention, is this basic need in the system for safety. The bottom-up attention is there to ensure the safety of the system. It's designed to know when there's some new noise or some new sight or some new something, am I safe?
Right.
That's the first question that the system is essentially asking itself. And so, yeah, I like to talk about attention as a safety game. It's the premise that if I learn to feel safe, or when I feel safe in the body, it is much easier to not kind of jump at every stimulus that's there. And we can all think of either ourselves when we're in, like think of the word jumpy, like what we think of or associate with it, right? It's pulled or called to any particular stimulus. And we all know certain people in our lives or our own capacity or tendency to do that, right? Is to just jump at whatever the thing is. So the more that we cultivate over time this sense of safety in the body, that the attention too can relax or ease into that top-down capacity to kind of stay where we are. And of course, when we're talking about preschoolers, obviously it's a different conversation than we're talking about a 12th grader or an adult, but not all that much.
Okay.
Like if we think about, so the acronym I often reference with that safety first question is HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Like we as adults, and certainly toddlers, we look at kids who are, when they're hungry, like forget it, like maybe you just become a little bit of a total nightmare for a hot second, but as soon as I put a couple crackers in your mouth, you're back. Oh, hello.
Everything's okay again. Yeah.
Everything, all the other systems come back online. So it's the way that our systems kind of go offline when we don't feel like our needs, and when the body registers that our needs aren't fully cared for. So it's always really helpful also in the background, because one of the things I often like to walk teachers or parents through is, it's not that kids aren't paying attention. That's like a misunderstanding of attention. We're always paying attention to something. The question is, to what? And why is that the thing that calls our attention? So maybe it's because I'm really hungry right now. There is only room for me to know, hey, feed this system to sustain. That's as far as my attention will take me. Like I don't have complex capacity to hold that and the alphabet and whatever we've got going on in mind, and that's P.S. completely true for adults. Like it absolutely impacts us as well, so when we get in these attention struggles where it feels like, oh, this child is being disrespectful, or why aren't you paying attention to this lesson, or I told you to set the table, or whatever the thing is, and their attention is somewhere else, or they're distracted, or they forget, like but it's not, that becomes a game of power and control that is maybe not the most helpful in that situation. Or again, it sort of fundamentally misunderstands attention itself. So I find that the question, where is your attention? It's not why aren't you paying attention to me? Why aren't you paying attention? It is where is the attention? That can help soften just our own view, in those moments when it feels like, oh, pay attention to me.
Right. I love that. Like, what a good question. Where is your attention? And I never thought of it like that.
It allows us to give the child a moment to practice top-down attention.
Yeah.
So the difference between, hey, I'm up here, pay attention to me, please, which is ultimately a stimulus-driven form of attention. That's, I'm calling your attention over here. Which is fine. And of course, lots of times in the life of working with children, will that be an appropriate way to do it? But it also never allows them to develop the capacity to place their attention willfully. So when we say, where is your attention right now? Are you ready to listen, or are you ready to pay attention to me? Are you able to hear these instructions, or, you name it, whatever might come next. And then they choose. it's harder. I want to be real clear. Like it doesn't necessarily make it easy. It's usually more expedient to be like, hello, I'm here. And we know all their attention. But it never grows the capacity. And so if ultimately we want that over time, every so often, it could be really helpful to let children choose to place the attention to you, albeit choose with a little bit of extra transition time, with a little, right? We got to build into that activity the knowledge that they may choose to place their attention somewhere else before they choose to place their attention with me. But if we have, a little bit of an openness to that, knowing the benefits of it, I think that can be helpful.
Yeah, really interesting. Can you maybe give us some practical examples for teachers or parents that are watching about how they might cultivate this type of attention with preschoolers?
Yeah,
or with themselves.
Yeah, well, exactly for ourselves. I mean, that is a lovely question for anyone. By the way, where is my attention right now?
Yeah.
And, I know there are all sorts of formal practices for mindfulness that are easily accessible, and generally kind of any anchor practice. That is I'm going to notice my breath. I'm going to stay with my breath. I'm going to notice when my mind wanders, and I'll bring it back without judging because it's doing its thing. It's doing what we should expect it to do. And I come back. But those are the ones we can kind of talk about more often. There's a zillion apps and recorded practices to practice that sort of attention. But even just setting a reminder on your phone that says, where is my attention right now? Just check in. And it doesn't matter where it is, because as soon as you become aware, oh, my attention is off out the window. My attention is on my stomach. My attention has totally wandered to planning tomorrow's grocery list. Whatever it is, The second I become aware of where the attention is placed, that is actually mindfulness. That's awareness of the present moment. And frankly, it's the same thing with a kid. So it doesn't have to be a practice that is designed for them to listen to you. It doesn't have to be a question that's, where is your attention? Now please bring it here. It could actually just be, all right, let's everyone right now notice where your attention is now. And then maybe we all share, where was your attention? I was noticing the crayon. I was noticing the bird. So that practice of, because when we do that, we're offering the possibility that a child could know, or an adult could know, that they are able to be aware of attention. In any moment, they're able to just notice, like that's a thing you could notice, right? And we play other noticing games, like notice 5 things that are red, or things like that are kind of like hunting for various stimulus. But I like taking it, I sort of back a step. It doesn't have to be so. Jazzy is the word that comes to mind. Not that it's like a jazzy game. Notice 5 things that are red. But, it doesn't. I think sometimes we try to overcomplicate it or feel like we have to make it really entertaining. When, especially for like someone who's 4, like, where's your attention right now? Like, what a cool question. And it's not a weird question for them in the same way that it's weird for us, because we should remember, frankly, children in many ways are a lot more mindful than we are. Young children, it's all new, it's all interesting, and that they could just be enthralled with absolutely anything about their environment that we have probably trained ourselves out of noticing.
Right.
It's not so interesting to notice, oh, the wall is gray. But for kids, that could be really interesting. Like, I've never seen a wall this big, or I've never seen a wall that's gray, or anything new can be interesting and a lovely object of attention. So in some ways, they could teach us with that game.
Yeah, I love that. It's so true. Like, it's like the joke, right? That the children love to play with the box rather than the toy, because that curiosity goes to different things. So I love that. Yeah. So Alan, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about So there's a lot of research that I keep reading about self-regulation and how important it is to, guide young children in that aspect. And I know attention is a part of that. So do you recommend teachers, have a focused practice of teaching children how to pay attention, or just doing these kind of mindful moments that you've talked about, like stopping and saying, where's your attention now?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that both have their place. I guess in some ways, I like to talk about those informal mindfulness practices because I think they get short shrift. I think that sometimes teachers in particular feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do this with a whole classroom. I need more training. I need this and I need that. I don't have the right curriculum. I blah, 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 blah. All the reasons, which it can feel really overwhelming to teach mindfulness practices in a formal way to kids. And while I will say, I think there are lots of good trainings out there, and it's not it doesn't have to be as intimidating as people think. It also doesn't have to be as formal as all of that. And that's why, again, I think some of these little questions like, where is your attention, or what are you noticing, or any of that stuff can be a way for teachers to just give kids a window into the fact that this is a thing you can know. Right? What are you feeling in your body right now? Where is your mind? Where is your attention? That children can both know and articulate, or have an awareness of, and be able to speak about these qualities of attention, what it is, to what they feel internally, what the sense of the body, the sense of emotions, the sense of what they're thinking. All of those things are fairly doable for even a preschooler. At the same time, it is true and real that one of the projects of school in particular is helping kids to, kind of learn to listen to others, learn to share, learn to do all sorts of things that may require them to self-regulate in a certain way. Like, I really want this toy, but this is like someone else is playing with it, and it's not helpful or appropriate if I go up and just grab it, or if I just hit them, because, or any of those kinds of things. So we do want to also help them to do that. And I think that mindfulness is an incredibly important tool in the toolbox when we talk about that, right? That they could start to gain, I think of it less about self-regulation. It's self-regulation is true. That's what they're doing. Like the decision to not hit this person when I want to, or that involves self-regulating. But I think more, it's like the step back is that often we just tell them, you have to be quiet now, or you can't hit, or you can, and we don't always help them to know how to achieve that. It's the mindfulness component that, like, what are you feeling in your body? What are you noticing? Like, oh, I'm feeling a lot of mad right now. I love Mr. Rogers' question, what do you do with the mad that you feel? So beautiful. And that, oh, actually, there's a lot of things I could do with it. I don't have to just hit you. But you can't do that if you don't notice, oh, I feel the mad right now. And then what do I do with the mad? And that I have a choice about what I do with the mad that I feel, and so on and so forth. So,
yeah. Well, thank you. It's really, really been interesting learning so much about all the different types of attention and all those great, simple moments that we can bring into our day, I think, to help students. And as you said, these are things everyone can do. You don't have to read a lot of books and just go to a training course for 12 hours to start doing these type of things. So thank you, Alan, so much. And I just want to remind everyone watching, if you want to learn more about Alan's organization, we'll have the links to his website in his speaker bio, so feel free to check that out. And thank you again, Alan, for joining us today.
Thank you very much.